all of Hollywood's like, yep, let's make her a thing, let's make her a thing. But she's never made a movie that's been successful.
The internet is not my biggest fan. It never has been, but it especially isn't these days. I've made some stupid choices.
What an idiot I've been as a young person in this industry who has no filter and no idea what she's doing.
I don't need your business. Thanks.
To all the people who are up in my DMs trying to guess what character I'm playing, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to answer your DMs. Let's address the elephant in the room. I'm the hottest person in the world.
That's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
After weeks of speculation, backstage whispers, and mounting industry backlash, Rachel Zegler has finally broken her silence on the crumbling Evita revival. And in classic Zegler fashion, she's not exactly taking the fall. Instead, the actress is reportedly pointing fingers at the very production she once praised, claiming that the rehearsal process was toxic and emotionally damaging.
Lots of people to thank for this video.
Spoiler alert!
None of them bought a ticket.
According to sources close to the situation, Zegler now sees the Evita fallout not as a result of her own alleged behavior, but as the byproduct of what she describes as an unwelcoming, overly critical, and creatively stifling environment. If there's a meltdown happening, some say, she's casting the blame squarely on the room. This latest shift in narrative is raising eyebrows, especially among those familiar with the behind-the-scenes drama. Rather than addressing the persistent reports that she clashed with director Jjaime Lloyd, ignored staging cues, and even walked out of rehearsals, Zegler is reportedly reframing the experience as one shaped by systemic dysfunction.
CEO of IBM.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Rachel feels like she was set up to fail, one insider claimed. She says there were egos in the room, outdated hierarchies, and a tone that left no space for emotional safety. Another source alleged she told confidants she felt gaslit and micromanaged during technical rehearsals, and that she's now questioning whether she should have ever signed onto the project in the first place. But not everyone's convinced. The timing of her remarks has fueled speculation that this may be less about truth and more about strategic deflection. Her statements emerged just as rumors intensified that Jjaime Lloyd, once her most vocal supporter, had grown so frustrated with her behavior that he began exploring backup casting options.
The Snow White re-release film averaged $50 per movie theater, which is less than 4 tickets.
For critics, it's yet another attempt to shift focus away from her on-set conduct and back to a more familiar angle. Rachel Zegler, the misunderstood artist navigating a cold and unsupportive system. But with stakes this high, the public isn't just listening, they're watching closely. What makes this pivot even more intriguing is how quickly the narrative has shifted. Not long ago, Evita was being touted as a passion project for Zegler, a role she publicly gushed about, calling it transformative and something she'd dreamed of since childhood. Now, that same process is being painted in starkly different tones. Descriptions like emotionally unsafe and creatively stifling have emerged from unnamed sources said to be close to the actress. For some observers, this change in tone doesn't signal a revelation. It suggests damage control. Inside the rehearsal space, the story reportedly took a very different shape.
I'm a very talented, capable individual. I'm here for a reason. I can do it.
According to individuals familiar with the production, tensions began early and escalated quickly. There were missed cues, abrupt exits, and increasingly strained energy among cast and crew. At the center of it all, several sources say, was Zegler. While she now points to a toxic culture as the root of the show's struggles, others insist it was her own reported conduct that fractured the production's rhythm from day one. Allegations began circulating that Zegler frequently arrived late to rehearsals, sometimes accompanied by a small entourage, offering vague explanations that felt more performative than sincere. She'd walk in saying something like, "Sorry, I'm just emotionally overloaded today," said one castmate, and then question everything Jjaime said, from blocking to character tone. Jjaime Lloyd, a director widely respected for maintaining a focused, collaborative process, was reportedly forced to shift from directing to diffusing. Some insiders claimed he was spending more time managing emotional dynamics than fine-tuning the production. Multiple team members described Zegler's feedback sessions as unusually intense. Rather than accepting notes, she reportedly questioned their intent, challenged directorial choices, and even altered her vocal delivery during songs that had already been locked in.
But after Rachel Zegler got lambasted for being the reason the film flopped, and she is the reason the film flopped, now I don't think that there was a ton of appetite for the film in general, but I think it had a fair shot at least breaking even.
Every adjustment sparked a discussion. said one technician. What were meant to be clear notes became drawn-out negotiations. While artistic debate is part of any production, several individuals said the sheer volume of pushback slowed the process and tested the patience of the entire company. According to production insiders, the tipping point came during a critical ensemble run-through. Zegler allegedly refused to perform the final scene unless the lighting was adjusted to suit what she described as her emotional intention. The request halted the rehearsal entirely, prompting a closed-door meeting between the lighting designer, stage manager, and Jjaime Lloyd. "We had 10 days before tech," one source noted, and she was treating it like a film set with endless retakes. That's not how theater works. As tensions grew, morale among the cast reportedly dropped. Some ensemble members asked to be repositioned on stage to avoid direct interaction with Zegler, while others requested microphone-level changes, claiming her vocal improvisations were overpowering the group. "She was doing her own thing vocally," said one chorus member. "It made it hard to stay in sync." Though the team attempted to maintain cohesion, insiders described the environment as increasingly strained, one where small issues became big and the usual rhythm of rehearsals was disrupted by unpredictability.
It's kind of sinking in more and more that tomorrow is happening and the trailer is coming out.
But it's hard. And it's lonely. It's very lonely. I just know that if that loneliness can exist, so can other things, and I will be okay.
All of this stands in sharp contrast to Zegler's current narrative. While she describes a harmful work culture, others allege that the atmosphere became reactive and unsteady because of her. "What's being labeled as toxic," said one person close to the production, "was more about a lack of consistency and escalating friction. It wasn't the environment breaking her, it was the environment responding to her." This isn't the first time concerns have surfaced about how Zegler handles conflict. Following the turbulent Snow White press tour, similar critiques emerged. That when faced with backlash, she leans heavily into cultural narratives to reframe criticism as bias or oppression. Now with Evita, that same playbook appears to be in motion, but this time, theater insiders, less influenced by fan culture and more embedded in process, seem less willing to accept that framing without scrutiny. In their view, accountability is part of the craft. And deflection, no matter how artfully packaged, doesn't change what happened on the stage. Take Snow White as an example. During the press tour, Zegler offered a modern take on the classic story, raising questions about the central romance, expressing discomfort with the prince's role, and advocating for a fresh perspective. While some viewers appreciated her candor, others felt the commentary came across as dismissive of the original film's legacy. The reaction was polarized. In the aftermath, Zegler framed the backlash as part of broader conversations around gender, representation, and progress.
So I've got my Baymax blanket, which I use when I have anxiety.
Suggesting the criticism reflected deeper cultural discomfort rather than her personal opinions alone. It's a pattern some insiders say has become familiar. When things go sideways, the critique is rarely met head-on. Instead, the narrative shifts outward, towards social commentary, towards systems of oppression, toward vague but emotionally resonant claims of being misunderstood. In the case of Evita, sources suggest that she's now invoking the language of creative oppression to recast her role in the show's unraveling. One source close to the production said, "She's described the space as emotionally unsafe, but for the rest of us, it was just a rehearsal room, structured, direct, and focused." That structure, however, may be exactly what clashed with her approach. The theater world, particularly on the West End, runs on discipline, collaboration, and repetition. There's little room for improv or unilateral choices. Notes are expected. Direction is constant. And when a performer resists that process, it doesn't just affect them, it impacts everyone. "Rachel seemed to take criticism personally," said one crew member. "When adjustments were suggested, she sometimes reacted as though she was being singled out, even attacked. For some, this signals a larger misunderstanding of how ensemble theater functions. While film sets often accommodate actor-driven rewrites or emotional flexibility, live theater thrives on cohesion. And when cohesion falters, the whole show feels it. If Zegler did feel stifled or emotionally overwhelmed, the sources say it wasn't by an oppressive system. It was by the very standards that every other cast member worked under without issue. And yet, the narrative continues to shift in Zegler's favor, at least from her side. In her version of events, the process wasn't collaborative, it was exclusionary. The rehearsal room wasn't structured, it was hostile. The direction wasn't guidance, it was micromanagement.
If I was a Hollywood executive, I would blacklist her.
She's allegedly told those close to her that the environment failed to hold space for artists like her, young, outspoken, and determined to reshape traditional roles. According to one insider, she's referred to the process as creatively narrow and hierarchical, terms that seem carefully chosen to resonate with broader cultural conversations about inclusion and modernization in the arts. It's a powerful framing strategy. By contextualizing friction as a clash between old-school rigidity and new-school expression, Zegler places herself at the heart of a larger struggle. But insiders say that narrative doesn't quite match what actually happened behind the scenes. According to multiple sources involved with the production, the show wasn't hampered by systemic resistance. It was slowed by a singular issue: unpredictable conduct from the lead. When one performer regularly deviates from blocking, questions, foundational character motivations, or pauses rehearsals to challenge lighting or staging notes, the ripple effect is real. Even those who initially supported her casting are beginning to voice concern, quietly but clearly. "She's a remarkable talent," said one person close to the creative team. "But talent doesn't excuse disrupting a process this carefully built." Another insider added, "She has vision, no doubt, but when that vision overrides collaboration, it's no longer leadership, it's obstruction." That distinction is critical in theater, where trust is everything. Directors need to know an actor will show up on time, hit their marks, and adjust quickly. Cast members need to feel that their ensemble isn't being thrown off balance by one performer's choices. And crew members, who often work long hours behind the scenes, need consistency to do their jobs well. In this case, several say, the inconsistency became the headline. And now, despite public efforts to reframe the situation, it's that headline that continues to dominate the conversation.
I'm gonna be on a talk show tonight, and I'm gonna talk shit about them on the talk show. Talking shit on the talk show. This is the one time in my life where if you have something to say, I don't want to hear it.
Behind the curtain, the tension reportedly reached a breaking point. According to several sources, Jjaime Lloyd, once one of Zegler's most vocal champions, began limiting his direct communication with her. Instead, all feedback was funneled through the stage manager or his assistant. For those familiar with the theater world, that's not just unusual, it's a red flag. When a director disengages from their lead, it signals a serious rupture in trust. "It's not sustainable," said one crew member. "You can't build a show around someone who's not in sync with the team." Discussions began to surface, quietly at first, about potential replacements. Multiple sources claim Lloyd held private meetings with producers and legal consultants to explore possible exit strategies. One particularly contentious rehearsal reportedly pushed the matter to the forefront. Zegler is said to have refused blocking adjustments, challenged lighting design, and exited mid-session without explanation. She walked out, an insider shared, not in a dramatic storm-off, just silently, like the day was done for her, regardless of where we were in the process. These moments didn't happen in isolation. Over time, they reportedly formed a pattern, one that production staff found difficult to work around. Lloyd, known for his exacting yet emotionally grounded style, had built a reputation for crafting tight, ensemble-driven shows. But insiders say Evita felt less like a cohesive vision and more like damage control. "It wasn't about staging anymore," said one technician. "It became about emotional management, navigating unpredictability, and shielding the rest of the cast from the fallout." And even the producers, who initially leaned heavily on Zegler's name to generate buzz, were said to be growing wary. Ticket sales began to slow. Fan chatter cooled. Some theatergoers reportedly reached out about refunds after hearing whispers that the show's star might not make it to opening night. Inside the production offices, the tone reportedly shifted from optimism to damage assessment. As one person put it bluntly, the question stopped being, "How do we make this great?" and became, "How do we salvage what we can?"
What would you say to those who are just kind of overly critiquing the film at this point? You've worked so hard on it.
I'm getting on across the block here. Hold on.
All right.
The theater industry is small, especially in the West End. Reputation travels fast, and while publicists can massage headlines, word of mouth among stage managers, directors, and casting consultants often carries more weight. According to multiple insiders, Zegler's presence in the Evita production has already sparked behind-the-scenes conversations in other companies. The tone of those conversations? Cautious, respectful of her talent, yes, but wary of what's being described as a growing pattern of conflict. One veteran choreographer reportedly remarked, "She approaches stage work like film, lots of second-guessing, needing resets, emotional cues over structural ones, but in theater we don't have the luxury of infinite takes." Another costume designer, who had previously worked with major West End leads, said, "She's young and she's got star power, but there's a difference between passion and disruption, And right now, that difference is being noticed. This isn't about industry politics, it's about process. In live theater, rhythm is essential. Everyone from the lighting technician to the chorus member depends on timing, clarity, and cohesion. And when one actor repeatedly challenges the structure, no matter how talented they may be, it doesn't just slow things down, it changes the atmosphere. Several West End professionals now privately advise caution when her name comes up in casting discussions. It's not a blacklist, said one source, but it's a flag, a big one. And it's not just backstage veterans sounding the alarm. Up-and-coming performers, some of whom once viewed Zegler as a trailblazer for Gen Z actresses, are reportedly rethinking that view. A vocal coach working with Broadway hopefuls shared, "Young actors are watching this unfold. They're seeing how public perception is shifting. They're learning what not to do and how quickly goodwill can evaporate when collaboration takes a back seat." It's the kind of quiet distancing that doesn't trend on Twitter, but echoes throughout rehearsal rooms, casting boards, and contract negotiations. For someone once hailed as a rising star, that kind of subtle reputational shift can be harder to bounce back from than any bad headline. Zegler's public image was once her superpower. Emotive, artsy, self-aware. She shared handwritten captions about identity, posted black and white rehearsal shots, and opened up about insecurities in a way that felt intimate and refreshing.
I don't know if I've ever explained before. I was cast in West Side Story on January 9th, 2019. 1919, so 19's my lucky number. That probably interests no one, but it's interesting to me, so bye.
Fans connected with her vulnerability. The industry, always searching for an authentic voice, leaned in. She wasn't just another ingenue. She was a symbol of the modern actress, talented, thoughtful, and emotionally tuned in. But over time, that emotional transparency began to feel rehearsed. The captions started sounding scripted. The behind-the-scenes selfies looked more like editorial spreads than candid moments. And the long reflections on creative pain and misunderstood genius, they began to feel less like insight and more like image control. One pop culture writer recently observed, "It's no longer about vulnerability, it's about strategy. She's not sharing, she's managing." The reaction to her most recent Evita-related posts underscores that shift. In response to the rising backlash, Zegler posted a series of updates framed around creative integrity and emotional safety. The language was poetic, introspective, and full of carefully chosen terms like holding space and truth in the discomfort. And yet, many in the comment section didn't offer applause. They offered skepticism. One fan wrote, "This feels more like a PR essay than a personal reflection." Another asked, "Why does every issue turn into a manifesto?" This is the tightrope public figures walk, especially those who build their brands on raw honesty. Once the audience starts doubting your sincerity, even heartfelt posts can come across as damage control. Zegler's defenders argue she's simply sharing her truth in a complicated industry, but her critics counter that every caption seems timed for narrative control. Every carousel of tear-streaked selfies, another attempt to redirect attention away from the issue at hand. And in the case of Evita, that issue is no longer vague. The concern isn't simply whether she's hurting, it's whether she's able to work within a team, take direction, and prioritize the project over the personal. Because when every post starts with, "I was misunderstood," and ends with a poetic flourish, it becomes harder and harder to tell where the artistry ends and the spin begins. From a distance, Rachel Zegler's career still looks active. She's got roles lined up, a sizable online following, and a name that still generates clicks. But a closer look reveals something harder to ignore. The scale of her projects is shrinking. After her breakout performance in West Side Story, a Spielberg film no less, many expected her to ascend quickly into A-list territory. Instead, her post-debut trajectory has looked more like a cautionary tale than a star on the rise.
I think that's really important that you see me as a human being, because I think a lot of people don't. So, I don't know. I want that disclaimer out there.
Her next big studio role, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, underperformed at the box office and received lukewarm reviews. Her involvement in the Snow White remake, once seen as a bold step forward for representation, quickly became a PR minefield. And now, Evita, her chance to reset the narrative through raw stage performance, is being overshadowed by behind-the-scenes drama. Meanwhile, her upcoming project, a low-budget indie with Marisa Tomei, has little buzz, minimal marketing, and no signs of awards season traction. It may still be a meaningful role, but for someone who was once touted as Hollywood's next great leading lady, it feels like a step down. Industry insiders recognize the pattern. When studio confidence wanes, agents pivot toward indie scripts and festival entries, less for commercial return, more to restore credibility. It's a tried and true formula. Shift from spectacle to substance, rebrand as a serious actor, and hope critics take notice. But in Zegler's case, this pivot doesn't look voluntary. It looks like a reset, one driven by necessity, not vision. What's perhaps more telling is what's not on her calendar. There are no new franchise leads, no streaming megadeals, no major production announcements bearing her name. Instead, what surfaces most often in headlines are apologies, explanations, and carefully worded statements about creative freedom. She's still visible, but increasingly that visibility is tied to controversies rather than achievements. Hollywood is watching, and while talent still opens doors, reputation determines whether those doors stay open. If Zegler wants to change the story, she'll need more than captions and carefully curated roles. She'll need a performance, on stage or on screen, that silences the speculation, not fuels it. At the heart of all this is a question that's becoming harder to ignore. Is Rachel Zegler in the middle of a meltdown, or finally being forced to confront the consequences of unchecked momentum? Because even among her most loyal fans, there's a shift in tone. Less blind support, more cautious curiosity. The same public that once rooted for her rise is now quietly asking if this was inevitable. The Evita situation wasn't an isolated misstep. It appears to follow a recognizable pattern: emotional pushback when challenged, reframing criticism as cultural bias, and relying heavily on messaging rather than reflection. There's a clear difference between being misunderstood and being unwilling to grow. And right now, some observers say Zegler hasn't made that distinction. She's not reinventing, she's repeating. And yet, the opportunity to pivot still exists. Evita, for all its chaos, was also a gift. A stripped-down role, a passionate director, a stage without filters. It could have been her moment to reset, not with buzzwords or curated vulnerability, but with presence, performance, and humility. But instead of surrendering to the process, insiders say she resisted it, attempting to reshape the role, the structure, even the entire creative space to match her own sense of control. The result? A production on the edge, a director reevaluating everything, and a star now caught between what she believes she stands for and what her collaborators say they experienced. It's the kind of tension that doesn't just end with the final curtain. It lingers in calls to casting agents, in whispers over coffee, in silent checklists of who's easy to work with and who isn't. Still, Zegler is young, her talent is real, and the door isn't closed. But the next step matters, not just for the public, but for the industry watching from behind the scenes. Will she take the cue and evolve, or double down on the story she's been telling? Because at some point, the applause doesn't come from being understood. It comes from delivering the performance no one saw coming. So what do you think? Is Rachel Zegler spiraling, or finally being held to the same standard as everyone else? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe, and don't miss the next video, because what's coming might just change everything.